I know what you mean. It's very neat and straight. Yeah. Oh, John's
okay. Everyone okay? Excellent. I'm sure you enjoyed getting your photo there. I think that's everyone's one of the favourite places on the tour. Okay, we're going to talk a bit more about John Lennon now. John was born on the 9th of October 1940. He was born in Oxford Street Maternity Hospital in Liverpool city centre. The building where John was born, it's not a hospital anymore, it's students' accommodation now, but there is a nice plaque on the building to say it was where John was born. That's near the two cathedrals, so if you're up in that area, you'll be able to go and see the building where John was born. As we saw before, John spent the first 5 years of his life living in the Penny Lane area in Newcastle Road, and he lived there with his mum, Julia, and his grandfather. Now, John was born during the Second World War, and John's dad, Freddie Lennon, was in the Merchant Navy, so he was away at sea loss when John was born, and in John's early days. John didn't see much of his father, Freddie. And John's parents, Freddie and Julia, they had a very unconventional marriage. While Freddie was away at sea, Julia was still a young woman. She liked to go out and have fun and have a good time, and she started to meet other guys. And as a married woman, her behaviour was frowned upon, especially by one of her elder sisters. She had 3 elder sisters and 1 younger sister. She was one of 5. And one of her elder sisters, Mimi, didn't have any children of her own. She was married to George, and they didn't have children. So Mimi basically forced Julia to give John up. They thought it would give John a more stable upbringing if he came to live here in Woolton with his mum's sister Mimi. So that's what happened. John left his mum when he was 5 and came to live here in Woolton with his mum's sister Mimi and her husband Uncle George. And they lived at a house called Mendips, which we're going to stop outside now. So this is John's main home in Liverpool, and this is where he lived from 1945 to 1963. John did spend a little bit of time living in a couple of apartments in the city centre, one which I'll point out to you later, but this was his main home in Liverpool. It's called Mendips. So you'll see it here in a minute with the black and white gate on the left hand side. Okay, so while you're taking your photos, I'll give you some more information. House is called Mendips. John's bedroom was the small upstairs bedroom at the front of the house there. That's where he used to practice his guitar. Even though John left his mum when he was 5 years old, he did see her now and again, but he got to know his mum properly in his teenage years, because by then John's mum, Julia, had a relationship with a guy called Bobby Dykins, and they didn't live too far from here. And they had 2 daughters called Jacqueline and Julia. So John used to go and see his 2 half-sisters and spend some time with his mum. And his mum actually taught him to play banjo, which led on to him playing the guitar, of course. Now, tragedy struck John and his family one night in July 1958. Been a lovely summer's day, like today. John's mum, Julia, had spent the day here at this house with her sister Mimi. About 10 o'clock in the evening, it was a lovely summer's evening, Julia waved goodbye to her sister at the gate here. She crossed the road behind where we're parked now. She was going to get her bus home, and she was knocked down and killed by a car. John was just 17 when his mum died, and this devastated John. John said he lost his mum twice in his life. Once when he was a little boy when he left her, and then again when he got to know her in his teenage years. Now, hopefully you can see the blue plaque there on the house, folks. That was unveiled on the 8th of December 2000. Exactly 20 years on from the day John was shot and killed in New York City. 2 years after that, 2002, this house came up for sale, and Yoko Ono, John's widow, has bought this house, and what Yoko has done with it, she's given it to an organisation called the National Trust. And those of you who aren't from the United Kingdom, what the National Trust does, it looks after properties of historical value to the nation. So this house has been now redecorated as it was when John lived here, and you can actually go on private tours inside the house. You also go to Paul McCartney's house, where we're going next, but you actually go inside the houses. Now it gets really busy. You can't just turn up, you have to book it through the National Trust. and I do know this weekend it's sold out completely. But what I would advise you to do, everybody, is next time you come to Liverpool, because I know you'll all come back because you'll have such a good time in the city, look ahead and book yourself online on the National Trust website and go inside the childhood homes of John Lennon and Paul McCartney. It's a magical thing to do, especially if you're a big Beatles fan. It's fantastic. And lots of famous people when they've been in Liverpool have done that. Most notably, a couple of years ago, Bob Dylan was here, and Bob went on the tour of John Lennon's house. Okay, so this is Mendips. John, in April '63, John's first son Julian Lennon was born, and John was obviously travelling the country with the Beatles then. So John's first wife Cynthia and his young son Julian, they lived for about 6 months in that house with Mimi until John was able to get them a home in London. Okay folks, if you just look to the right hand side, you'll see lots of trees there, lots of parkland. There's a golf course just behind the trees there. Now where we're going now is to the other side of the golf course, to a part of Liverpool called Allerton. And Allerton's where Paul McCartney lived on the first day that he met John Lennon. So once John and Paul became friends, that's how they get to each other's houses, by walking across the golf course or cycling across the golf course there. So let's talk about Paul McCartney. Paul was born on the 18th of June 1942 here in Liverpool. He was born in Walton Hospital, which is on the northern side of the city by the football grounds. We're in the south side of the city now. So Paul's 71 years old this year. Paul's mum, her name was Mary McCartney, and her job was a midwife. Lots of babies were born at home in those days instead of in hospital, and Mary was employed by the city to deliver the babies at home. So what happened was the McCartneys were supplied with a house by the city council to whichever areas Mary was needed most to deliver babies. So when Paul was growing up, he did live in several different houses around the city. But in 1955, when Paul was 13, the McCartneys were still living in the Speke area of Liverpool, and if you remember, I told you that's how he met George Harrison. But Mary McCartney was offered to move to this part of the city, Allerton, and she thought that was a positive move for a family. She thought it was a nice area to move to. But tragically, the McCartneys had only lived in this area for less than 1 year when Mary McCartney was diagnosed with cancer. She died in October 1956 when Paul was just 14. So Paul and John had that bond together. They both lost their mums when they were teenagers, so they understood how each other felt. Now Paul's dad